Hello friends, welcome to episode 128 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Not too bad. Got decent sleep last night, and I'm managing.
There were burgers and then there were cannolis, so I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, we're pretty full at the moment. So,
yeah. I thought today was going to be a sad day, but friends helped distract me from that, and I pulled up out of my little depressive fit this morning. So.
That's right. All it took was a little Dark Souls.
Yeah, took a little Dark Souls. Pick myself back up from the bonfire and try again. That's what you always do, man.
That's right.
So I don't know. We got a lot of show to go.
Let's just jump straight to show.
Jump straight into it. So today it's the second Wednesday of the month. So we are doing our systems spotlight as usual. Today we're talking about Chaosium Games, Call of Cthulhu 7th edition.
Yeah, 7th, which says edition, a lot, and it's not recent. Like 7th edition has been out for a while.
Yeah.
But it would, and I'm going to say this: never played it. Never got involved in it, never had any friends who played it, but I knew about it peripherally. I watched a few games in the past. I was at a convention a long time ago, and witnessed a few tables of it that were interesting. You know, I kind of didn't, I was never into the whole, horror suspense kind of thing that followed it, but I always thought that the lore was interesting. There was a point where I did I had to do some research for another game, and I did some research into Cthulhu, and a lot of just H.P. Lovecraftian stuff, and discovered his writing style, and some of the prevailing stories that existed from there, and the rabbit hole of stuff that came from it.
Oh, yeah.
It is immense. It is absolutely immense.
Start with Lovecraft, and then you go down the rabbit hole of the mythos.
Yes.
I always know, I'm kind of the same story as you, always known about the role-playing game, have never played it. But I have read, I wouldn't even say quite a bit. I've read a handful of Lovecraft. I have a copy of Eldritch Horror, the board game.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
It is an amazing board game. I think I played it with you, in fact.
I don't know if we ever got around to it, but I know I've suggested it several times, but it's like one of those board games where you need 6 hours to put aside.
Yeah. I must have played it then with another couple, because I know that I've played it, and it was neat. It was definitely different as board games, but totally had the feel.
Oh, yeah.
Completely had the feel.
Absolutely. But I've read a couple, or a handful of his stories, enough to get the feel for his writing and such like that, and whatnot.
And enough that we can both lay down this disclaimer right now for those who have not,
yes,
and are getting interested by our show.
So, disclaimer.
Right at the bat.
H.P. Lovecraft was a hella racist.
Complete racist.
Super racist. Even for his time, people were like, dude, tone it down.
Yeah.
We cannot say the name of his cat.
No.
It is exactly what you think it is, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very prevalent in his writing, just describing people as bestial and just really, really horrible things. So if you read his stories, do be prepared for that.
Yeah.
There
are also many connected works that followed that. Followed that theme to keep in the style, and I think that they were prevalent of the time, and connective of the time, and the authors there within, they are not reflective of our views in any way. We are modern. We have moved beyond this. We are not that, but we are looking. Yep. We will speak to it as it is part of the core contextual theme.
Sure.
So,
the one comfort I have, though, is H.P. Lovecraft is dead and gone. Good riddance.
Correct.
And all of his stories are public domain, so not a penny is going to his racist estate.
Correct.
So we are fully able to Death of the Author him, if you're familiar with that term.
Yep.
Where we can take his work for what it is, while not providing to his well-being at all. His contributions, though, to the horror genre, were significant, though, and will definitely live beyond his racist legacy.
Yes.
So he laid the great groundwork for it, so take what he wrote and make better stories out of it.
Yes, which people have done amazingly well at. One of the things that intrigued me about the whole genre and actual Call of Cthulhu as a game was that it is a very strong theme of horror and effectively like utter helplessness at the immensity of things.
Yeah, the thing about Lovecraftian horror is what we call cosmic horror.
Right.
And it kind of differs from the whole like monster of the week of like, rawr, I'm a werewolf and I'm going to eat you. Like that's terror in a sense. There's a clear and present danger that is mortal to your body. Whereas cosmic horror is more existential dread. In the idea that there are these like immense cosmic beings that we are barely insects to.
Right.
And they could roll over in their sleep and destroy our entire world and they wouldn't even notice.
Right.
You know. And that's the type of horror that we're talking about here. Now, there is some of the, definitely
Monster of the Week stuff.
If a deep one or a Shoggoth or something like that is in the room with you, you're not going to have a good time.
Right.
That's absolutely a thing. But like, the horror of Cthulhu is not, oh God, what is he going to do to me physically? It's, oh God, he exists.
Right.
This changes everything I think I know about the universe.
Exactly. And sometimes I will flat out say the concept of running that as a game and keeping that up in a system is daunting because players regularly face gods in D&D games. It happens all the time. They go toe-to-toe, mano-a-mano with the mentality and or physicality of a god. Yeah. To handle situations. And those kinds of reality-breaking moments when you have to recognize that means whatever this is incomparable.
Yeah.
It's sometimes hard to add a perspective to something that is incomparable. Well, and put it to something that is outside of their control. And I think that's one of the hardest parts about Call of Cthulhu in general is setting that expectation and meeting it as a storyteller.
Well, I think the game system itself does a very good job of kind of setting that up. There's several mechanics in play, like the fact that your hit points don't go up.
Agreed.
Period. Like, and then like when you start comparing like average hit point values versus average damage values on something as simple as a pistol, and you realize that if they crit, they can get you in one shot.
Right.
And your hit points never improve.
Yep.
So you're always one stray bullet away from death.
Which is where I come back to, and what kind of got me back into this and reading about it and listening more. I'll let you kind of run with the mechanics.
Sure,
They're fantastic, and it's totally your thing. But when I started looking at some of the narrative pieces that come out of this and what changes were made, it kind of drew me back in and reminded me of a very specific story. And I'm going to get it out of the way, and then we can get right into the history of this.
All right, sure.
But I had to do some digging to find it. But there was a guy, and I told the story I know in one of the episodes that I couldn't find it, who, when he wanted his players to feel vulnerable. From the beginning of the game, he wanted them to have that feeling. So he got, so he had 7 players at his table.
Sure.
And, standard outlay. One of them was a fighter, very cocky. You had your rogue, your mage, your cleric, your sage type character.
Sorry, this was a D&D game?
Yes.
Okay.
And he brings them all, they go through their session 0, everything goes fine, everybody's got their characters, they're all good. Session 1 opens up, they eventually get to, your Arthurian court-style scene, where in walks the villain to present themselves. And one of the players, he's got 2 or 3 guards with him, his henchmen, and, the players are like, oh, okay, so this is the big bad guy. All right, so what's he gonna do? Kind of a thing. And one of the players is like, you're just a man. A man can be killed, and said, I'm going to go attack him. He's like, okay, let's roll initiative. I'll even give you an ambush. And he's like, okay. And so he gets, he swings and hits him, and when he hits him, it drives into his shoulder. And the guy is like, you connected, you do damage. Okay. His retort, he stabs you through the chest. He literally picked up 4 dice for damage rolls them out in front of them. They were D20s.
Oh, wow.
You take 40 points of damage. He's like, I'm dead. He's like, he twists and pushes you off his blade.
Yep.
Anyone else want to try this?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get back to having a conversation now? And he left him dying. He goes, but our friend, he's dead. And continued monologuing and talking with the king for a full 10 minutes. And he kept telling that player, go ahead, roll another death blow. Roll another death blow. The player died right there.
Oh, yeah.
First act, and the player was like, fuck this, I'm out. And like got from the table and left.
Bye.
The next day they talked and he was just like, that was great acting. Thank you so much for letting the players know what the dread level was. And he literally had a ringer murdered in front of the PCs.
That's great.
To get them in the mood that
That's
great. This guy was going to mean business all the way through the story.
Mm-hmm.
And it set that precedent. And I think this game doesn't necessarily need to do that because the feeling is already there. It's already part of what's embedded.
Yeah, you kind of, hopefully you kind of know what you're getting into in Call of Cthulhu. And if you don't, you should learn pretty quick because you're going to have a bad time if you try to treat it like D&D.
Yep. So,
sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, let's start painting that picture.
All right, so 7th edition Chaosium, published by Chaosium Games, first released in 1981. Not 7th edition, but Call of Cthulhu in general.
The original, yes.
System was based on the basic role-playing game by Chaosium.
Mm-hmm.
So basically we've had just several versions of it. It's always been really with Chaosium.
And the version to version, it has not changed much.
Until, I believe, 7th edition, where 7th edition actually was the first major shift in the rules system.
Yeah.
Because I remember when it came out, actually, being that it's always been kind of in part of the tabletop zeitgeist, that I do remember a little bit of upcry of like, oh god, did you see the new Chaosium, 7th edition rules? And I was like, no.
Yeah.
I don't really play, so I wouldn't know what, the difference.
Right.
And I do remember there was some people going like, no, this is actually good, and some people going like, you changed everything,
Yeah, exactly.
But let's see here. Now, there was in 2001, and I had this book, the D20
one,
version of Call of Cthulhu.
The conversion, yeah.
Yeah.
Which did include some interesting rule changes.
It did. I mean, the problem with it was that, of course, it was a level-based, class-based system because they tried to turn it basically into D&D. But I really liked how they did magic. Magic was very cool because you could take stat damage. Like, you can cast that spell as many times as you want, but roll a d6 and subtract it from your strength every time. And literally until you can't keep your legs under you, you can cast that spell. It was really cool. So, for better or for worse.
Because they added one of the questions that just came up in the live show chat was what was the crying point? And I think two of the biggest points that came up was they did add rules for sanity and luck, which changed a flavor of the game.
I thought the sanity rules were always there.
They were new rule sets for them, and
new rule sets. For
and that was the whole thing is that it shifted the tone. Mm-hmm. And again, people were tending to play it still like D&D in a different theme story.
Yeah.
And this kind of forced the hand of a new story style. Although, through all of these versions, the narration depictions that they laid out were virtually identical.
Oh, yeah.
They've kept with that the whole way through, and I think that's beautiful.
When I was researching for the show, I was Seth Skorkowski, friend of the show, who talked to us a bit about space operas and Traveler and such like that. I did a really comprehensive breakdown of the system.
Yeah.
And so I was watching his videos and whatnot, and he was saying that like he's got old like 4th and 5th edition modules and stuff like that he doesn't have to change anything. They're completely valid.
Yeah, because they're story-based modules.
Yeah.
They're and when we get down to the narrative parts of this, I'll kind of describe that a little differently. Is that there was a major shift in many of the modules away from the traditional D&D style of writing modules, of room to room, encounter to encounter. And that made the game very different because you weren't dealing with stats and combat as much as you were dealing with discovery and story. And I think that really makes a huge impact difference and sets this apart in many ways from other systems.
Yeah.
So.
Now, speaking of other systems, actually, there's a lot of other licenses
God, so many.
that kind of carry the whole Cthulhu name, the Lovecraftian, that tie into this. And that's, I think, one of the most wonderful things about Lovecraftian horror is it's so portable.
Oh God, yeah.
So there are dozens of other time periods that you can play in out there, and some of these are like official products. Some of them are by other game systems, like Grenadier Games, Yog-Sothoth.com, Games Workshop, I guess, even had some. Triad Entertainment, Theater of the Mind Enterprises, Miskatonic River Press, Infogrames.
Do you remember Infogrames?
I don't.
Infogrames is one of the greatest PC game makers. They actually had a great theme song too. I'll just play it for you sometime.
Okay. But suffice to say though, like you can kind of take cosmic horror and overlay it onto just about anything. So there's Cthulhu Invictus, which is 100 AD Roman era. Cthulhu Dark Ages, Down Darker Trails, which is 19th century American Old West. Cthulhu by Gaslight is Victorian. Pulp Cthulhu, Octung Cthulhu is World War II. Atomic Age Cthulhu. I've got a copy of this because you bought it for my birthday a year or two ago. It was Cat Cthulhu.
I did.
Which is it's Cthulhu, but you are cats.
Yeah, I like the Cthulhu Rising and Cthulhu Icarus, which is the 23rd century space fiction that they did. Delta Green's, I think, one of the more recent ones.
Delta Green's been around for a while, but
there was a a game though.
Yeah,
that was more recent.
Yeah. It's got kind of its own setting, but it's all tied into
Punktown was the cyberpunk one that Miskatonic River did. And then you had the Gumshoe system, which was Trail of Cthulhu, and then World War II, the Cold War, World War Cthulhu. But there are even more than this that I know of that are just insane.
There's one, and I don't know if it's on this list or not. It might be this Atomic Age Cthulhu. No, it's not that one. But anyways, there's one set in like space, and it basically plays out like the movie Event Horizon.
Yes.
Oh, amazing.
Yes.
Or Dead Space. Dead Space is another really great one.
Yeah, and there are a lot of games that are inspired by, without a doubt, that are not technically genre, but you can clearly see the crossover points. I mean, there's a decent amount of Warhammer itself that has Cthulian aspects drawn right into it.
Oh yeah.
So
the warp is very Lovecraftian in that, like ancient star gods that are just
even even some of the New World game has aspects of Cthulian into it a little bit, with the way that chaos drains you as you're trying to get into certain areas, and you've got tendrils coming out of nowhere, and
the ichor drips upward. It's a little creepy. So, anyways, the original conception was was the Dark Worlds.
Yes.
So it's kind of what the game originally was. And then I
think it was Sandy Peterson was the one who convinced them to do it, because they didn't want to do it at first. And Chaosium was like, okay, is it RuneQuest? Is that what you're thinking of doing? Yeah, we're going to do that in Lovecraftian Dreamland. Basically, is what we're going to do. And then that became the original Call of Cthulhu in 1981, and Sandy stuck around for 4 editions.
4 editions, yep. It was passed off to Lynn Willis after that, continued
for
with
5
and 6 editions, and then Mike Mason and Paul Fricker took over for 7th edition in 2014.
Yep.
And that brings us up to present. It's been very consistent. It's one of the few game systems that wasn't passed around like a football, you know?
The only thing that changed was, I think they said in 2016 there was a new colored release of it that they released that was really nice.
Yep.
But what's great is you can go back to the old ones and grab info and effectively modules out of them, and they play perfectly fine.
Yes.
There's some really nice leather editions apparently as well that are out there. Which brings me to an interesting note, which is that 11 of the 21 Call of Cthulhu supplements currently in print from Chaosium are adventure books.
Yeah.
The only people who get close to that are White Wolf.
Oh, wow. at this point, I'd have expected that to be Wizards of the Coast with Dungeons and Dragons, but no.
No. It's a percentage. If you think about it, like, surely based upon numbers.
Sure.
I mean, D&D re-released a lot of stuff. It's not whole cloth new. But they just kept putting out new supplements. And this is just the ones that they did, not ones that have been added on by others.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. I mean, I've seen quite a few out there on Drive-Thru RPG. They had 10 awards between 1982 and 2003 from a various number of places. And then in 1996, well after they had been out, they were asked in Arcane, they did a reader poll in Arcane magazine to determine the 50 most popular role-playing games, and it came in as number 1.
That's astounding to me.
In 96, of all things.
I've been playing games for a long time, and how have I not played the number 1 game, this entire time? That's crazy to me.
And it was 10 years old at that point.
Yeah.
Which is
96, 15 years old.
So exactly.
Yep.
But and it is the most played game in Japan.
It's the most played game in Japan, yes. Call of Cthulhu is in Japan's zeitgeist the same way that D&D is in America's. It's like, you're going to play a tabletop RPG? Cool. Which Call of Cthulhu game are you playing, That's pretty crazy. All right, so you want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of the game now? I
would like you to run through that.
All right.
This may take a little while and sound complex, but in fact, it is not bad.
Now, I will say one thing. I initially took a brief look at this a while ago, and I was very put off because there was a lot of very big numbers, and it looked like there was a lot of math involved, and I just recoiled in horror. But what I can say, though, is now that I've looked at it quite a bit, it's very easy. All the math is done basically during character creation. Mm-hmm. And if you can divide by 2 or divide by 5, then great. Cool. That's all the math you're doing, Your statistics, you're going to roll 3d6, or for just a couple of them, you're going to roll 2d6 plus 6. Puts you in the same number space of 3 to 18, but they're guaranteeing essentially a 6 on one of those rolls.
Yeah.
And then you're going to multiply each one of those by 5. So you're going to end up with these very big numbers.
Yeah.
And the reason for the big numbers is because unlike most games that are D20 based, it's all percentile based. So you're rolling either your 2d10 for percentile dice or a d100 if you're one of those people who likes walking around with a die the size of a grapefruit.
So true.
All of your stats, including luck, are 3d6 times 5, or this 2d6 plus 6 times 5.
And the goal, in essence, is to roll under.
Yes, you're creating thresholds under which you want to roll them.
Yes.
On your percentile die. There's a lot of derived stats.
Mm-hmm.
Your HP, your size is one, because you'll actually... how big your character is kind of matters.
So does your age.
Your age matters. There's a whole chart for the modifiers to your stats after the fact, depending on how old you are.
Mm-hmm.
Are you young and spry, or are you old and wise? Have you picked up a few things along the way?
Yep.
And then from there, that will also kind of derive how your skills come out as well. They're going to do a calculation based off of whatever your base stats are. But skills are also figured out by your occupation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a classless, level-less system.
Mm-hmm.
But the closest you get to a class is your occupation.
Right.
Okay, and that's your job. Literally what you do for a living. So it's not anything like fighter or ranger or rogue. It's things like, I'm a private investigator. I'm a waitress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a vagabond.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a deep sea diver. There's a long and extensive list. And if you can't find exactly what you're looking for, you can probably find something that's close to what you're looking for.
Yeah.
From there, basically, you look at whatever that occupation offers. It will tell you how to calculate skill points for that particular occupation. It'll give you a quick little equation of add this number, multiply by this, and divide by this, or whatever, You get that many skill points, and it gives you a list of skills that are available to you. You may then divide that number of points into that many skills. And again, your skills are going to be on a sort of 0 to 99 scale as well. Because everything in this game system, you just roll percentile, try to get under it.
Which is pretty simple. And there are, what is it? If you roll within a certain bracket.
Yes. So, and this is kind of where I was a little freaked out by the amount of math.
Right.
But again, if you can divide by 2 and you can divide by 5, all the math is done for you.
Yeah.
So your brackets are basically half your score and 1/5 your score. And those are your hard and extreme thresholds, respectively.
Right.
So, say I've got a 60 in firearms pistol.
Okay.
Okay. Just making a simple shot at a regular old target, I'm going to roll my percentile dice and try to get 60 or under. Okay. Now, if this is a particularly tricky shot, like I'm making a really, like a called shot at maybe like the head, the Keeper of Secrets, which is what the storytellers are called in this system, may ask for that at as a hard check.
Okay.
At this point, I will need to roll 30 or under because that is half of 60.
Right.
Okay. Then, if I'm trying to like aim specifically for the eye, or like the fingers of its left hand,
or like at the wrist, so it drops somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now this might be an extreme difficulty, and so that's going to be 1/5 of my 6, which is what, 15?
Yes.
Something like that. 13.
13.
12.
12, because the 1/5.
Yes, 12. I can math.
Yeah. We're playing with numbers in our head.
Yeah, 12 or under. And then sometimes sometimes that's the target number, for them, but sometimes it also acts just as a threshold. So when we talk about combat a little bit later, that's where you get like your impaling strikes from. So I may just fire my gun at you, 60 or under. But if I hit that 12 or under, that's an impaling strike. That's essentially my crit range.
Nice.
And so then I do some bonus damage and some cool things happen for me, and we're all very happy about it. So skills are pretty straightforward as far as that goes. Advancement kind of happens through your skills. There isn't actually a proper like XP system in this,
which I think is neat.
It plays a little bit like Mouse Guard in that when you use the skill, you gain and you succeed with that skill, you gain a little check mark next to it. And then when you go into the development phase, you look at all your check marks and you try to roll over your skill, not under. Because the more you master a skill, the less you can learn about how to master that skill further, right?
Correct.
So you have to roll. You have to roll above your skill, and if you succeed in that, you roll a d10 and you add that to your, and you add it to your skill.
I like that.
And that's how character development's done. And that's why you don't have things like more hit points or anything like that. There's nothing to buy.
Right.
Luck
is another thing that they added. It's again, you said it was a drive stat and in a pool.
Luck is actually not a drive stat. That one's a 3d6 times 5.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, it's its own thing. I made a mistake here on the thing.
It was drive. Okay, so then that is just a different roll. It's not like you can, unlike some systems where luck is like I throw this die in, like a drama die or inspiration die. It's an actual roll on its own.
Yeah, it's kind of it's a funny stat because it's both a stat and a pool. So you're gonna have your luck score. So say it's like 50, right? Now the keeper may call for a luck check when they need to figure out if something happens on the toss of a die, but they don't want. But it's not like connected to a skill. Like you're not doing anything to actively cause it happening. Like I'm trying to hail a cab. Okay, give me a luck roll just to see if one shows up that you can hail. Okay, cool.
Right.
And then it acts like just every other roll.
Right.
D100 under the stat. But what you can do is you can actually spend your luck on a 1-to-1 basis to buy essentially numbers. So if I roll, okay, I pull out my gun and I'm shooting at a Bayaki. Extra points if you know what that is. And I need a 30 or under to hit it. And I roll a 27.
Okay.
Or no, sorry, not a 27. I roll a 33.
Okay.
So that's over my 30 that I needed it. So right now I'm missing. Okay. But I missed by 3.
Okay.
I can permanently reduce my luck pool, my luck stat, by 3 to buy those numbers that I need.
Oh.
To essentially buy it from a 33 down to a 30 and hit.
Okay.
But again, that's where it goes. Like, it's spent. And so sometimes, eventually, your investigator's
You
luck.
run out of luck.
Your investigator runs out of luck.
Okay.
So do that sparingly. It's not something that gets refreshed very often.
And the other thing is you can retry things by pushing them. There are consequences, but you can totally retry a roll. Like, I go to try and and break down the door with my to push in the door to force the lock.
Sure.
And I fail. I can then try to bash the door, retry opening the door effectively.
Right.
But now I have to explain the difference. So I'm going to put a heavy shoulder into it. Okay, so instead of it being you basically doing lock picking, now you're shouldering the door. Okay,
sure.
That's fair. If you fail that, there are consequences.
Yes.
And if it's botched, you can't.
Well, you can't push a botched roll. Is what it comes down to. So
I thought it was the second one. If it botches, you're done.
Well, no, I mean, because you can only push once.
Oh.
You're already done. And if you fail, it comes with consequences. So, like in your example, you would jam your shoulder or maybe take some damage or something like that. You know? But yeah, if you botch a roll, you can't push it. You can't try again. That's your consequence for failing.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like, though, that they offer you the ability to retry things, but they kind of put a limit on it,
Yeah.
So I don't know how many times, like in D&D, I've had that where it's like, okay, we'll do this. Okay, well, I failed. I'm just going to roll again.
Yeah.
And then you think, like, oh, damn, why am I even having you roll? Like, yeah, you could just roll
right
until you get it,
Well, it's the things like I always see cinematically, like the person's trying to start the plane, right? And it won't start. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to get out and spin the prop while they hold the choke.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the second thing. Goes out there, spins the prop, and it either starts up or it doesn't. So now the plane won't take off, and they've still got, the cultists chasing them down. What do you do then? Now you've got to move on because the first one didn't make it, and the second one didn't make it either. You've got to shift gears. You can't just keep trying, Or worse yet, you go to start it, and you go to pull the choke, and it comes out in your hand because you botched.
Yeah.
Now you've broken the plane. Uh-oh.
I mean, just straight up, you flooded it.
Yeah.
Now it ain't going to start for the next 5 minutes, and when you've got deep ones chewing on the on the tires, that's a bad time.
Yep.
So, like I said, skills, pretty straightforward, honestly. I really like the way that they play out. There is a vast number of skills. The only things I don't really like is that there is a lot of, like, subdivision in skills. I'm a big fan of, like, broad terms. Like, Savage Worlds does it really well for me. There's, like, 20 skills in the entire game. And most settings won't use all of them.
Yeah.
But this one has, like, a difference between firearms pistol and firearms rifle shotgun and firearms heavy weapon and firearms submachine gun.
Feels more like Palladium.
A little bit like Palladium. But the good news is, though, is that, like, if you get one of those to 50, it puts a plus 10 in all the other related ones. Because, honestly, if you can fire a pistol, you kind of probably know how a submachine gun works. You hold it by the handle, you squeeze the trigger, you point it at the thing you want to die. Speaking of pointing things
Combat.
Speaking of pointing things at things you want to die, combat. So initiative order goes by dex.
Okay.
So dex is just a stat. And then there's a weird rule that says firing a gun. Like, if you're just going to just unleash hell with a gun, no movement, no aiming, no other actions. Your one and only thing that you're going to do is just start spraying bullets. You get a plus 50 on your initiative.
You're laying down cover fire.
There you go.
Anyway, I started blasting.
I started blasting. So one thing I noted earlier is that the game system is highly lethal, and this is keeping very strongly with the horror background. And it's one of the reasons why, like, D&D doesn't work as a horror game, because you have way too many tools to deal with the things that should make you afraid.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier, like, in D&D, you fight gods all the time. Well, yeah, of course you can. When you have 250 hit points and a +5 Holy Avenger, of course you're going to go fight gods.
And with your cleric literally being able to snap 3 different ways by that point to basically bring you back to your feet from anything.
Yeah, exactly. And when death is a minor inconvenience because you have a cleric. Yeah, in this game, your average character hit points is about 15, give or take.
Yeah.
And you can easily do that in like 2 bullets from a gun.
Yeah.
1 if it's an impaling strike.
Yep.
And your hit point total never goes up, so you're always squishy. You're always mortal.
Right.
And someone with a switchblade is always a threat.
Yeah.
And so there's rarely a time when you're staring down overwhelming odds and going, I can take them.
Yeah.
You know? So it's basically just your skills.
Mm-hmm.
As always, it's the exact same thing. It's not a separate combat system. You just
Which
roll your.
I love.
Yeah, you just roll your applicable skill to whatever it is you're doing, fighting, melee weapons, or whatever subdivision of firearm you're trying to use. If you roll one of your extreme difficulties, as I mentioned earlier, this is an impaling strike. Now, with bludgeoning damage, you just do your max weapon damage.
Okay.
And then one of the derived stats that you've got is called damage bonus. And it comes from, I forgot to write it down, but I think it's based off of your size and your dex or something.
Okay.
But there's some way of figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have a damage bonus stat.
Mm-hmm.
And it will basically just be an extra die.
Gotcha.
Maybe a D3, maybe a D4, or something like that. And so with a bludgeoning damage, you'll do like your max weapon damage, which might be like a D4 if you're punching somebody, plus your damage bonus, which might be like a D3. So with an impaling strike with a fist, you might do 7 damage. I mean, you could lay someone out with that. That's half of your average hit points.
Mm-hmm.
With anything that isn't bludgeoning damage, you do base weapon damage plus your max weapon your max weapon damage plus your max damage bonus, and then you roll the weapon damage on top of that. So like as an example, a Colt 1911 .45 handgun, which was very common in that time, does a D10 plus 2 damage.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at 3 to 12 damage. Already, 1 bullet from that gun is pretty much going to put you in critical condition.
Mm-hmm.
If you roll an impaling strike, the lowest damage you can roll is 15.
Mm-hmm.
And that's average hit points for a person.
Yeah.
You can basically one-shot somebody, and that's the only reason you wouldn't one-shot them is if they're extremely tough and you rolled minimum damage.
Yep.
That's going to max out at 24.
Yeah. I mean, you can dodge. Dodge is a thing. Fight back was the one that always got me when I was trying to read up on fight back versus just dodging.
Yeah, fight back is an interesting mechanic. Dodge is pretty self-explanatory. There's a dodge skill, and you will want the dodge skill. It is the thing that keeps you alive. But yeah, you can actually fight back as a reaction, and that's basically it's kind of a combination parry counterattack.
Almost like a riposte.
Yeah, you like if you roll your own fighting skill, and this is I think really more for like melee style stuff. You're not really going to fight back in unless you're extremely close to a person firing a firearm. But you roll your own combat skill, and if you roll a hit on that, if you beat their roll, so if you roll lower than them, you actually do damage to them instead of them doing it to you.
Right, because they made a mistake stepping into combat with you.
Now, the only thing is you can't crit. You're never going to get your extreme impaling strike on that. There are some other little side rules for being overwhelmed. And this is kind of a cool thing to basically keep you from like just having a high dodge stat and being completely invincible. Is you can only dodge or fight back as many times as you have attacks. So if you've got 1 attack as a normal, average, everyday human being, you can only dodge once until you become overwhelmed. If you are overwhelmed, opponents get a bonus die against you. And how bonus die works is basically like advantage in D&D,
right?
Where you add in an extra tens die, and then you take the better of the two. And this gets a little complicated when you start running into like monsters with like 3 or 4 attacks. Because you start getting up on them, and they can just keep dodging you. And like an entire group, they can just dodge because they get 4 attacks, you know?
Yeah. One of the questions that came up in chat, and I was actually doing looking up real quick, was can you armor up or can you use martial arts for self-defense? There are some supported armor rules that are in the book that just reduce the damage by a point or two.
They act as damage reduction, and it's very minuscule.
Yeah, and there are some statements about whether the armor is intact or not, and that has more to do with the story than anything else.
Yeah.
You know, this story is not meant to be heroic characters.
It really
isn't.
isn't.
This isn't ninjas going to fight a cult. So a player who has martial arts abilities isn't an investigator by trade. They're a guard. They're a bodyguard. They might be an extra. That's not one of the player characters, but it's stepping away from the theme of what you're going into. So again, there's no rules for that because that's not the type of people you're playing with. It fits in the same kind of category as if I was to say my in my D&D game is there any stats for is there any way that I am more recognized than everyone else, therefore I get do I get bonuses for being recognized as a streamer? Like, well, that's D&D's a combat game. You don't having bonuses to being the lord of a specific county doesn't give you charisma everywhere.
Are you trying to tell me these orcs have neither liked nor subscribed?
Correct, they have not.
They didn't even smash that bell icon?
They did not. In fact, you're losing subscriptions.
All right, so 0 HP means you're dead.
Yep.
If more than half your HP gets taken, basically more than half your HP gets taken, you now have a major wound, and that's just a little check mark you put on there. That's a storied thing, but it has some pretty big consequences for it. Make a Constitution save or fall unconscious right then and there, which may result in the rest of your death, depending on what caused you to go unconscious in the first place.
Right.
And then recovery is remarkably slow. It's literally 1 HP a day. And keeping in mind, there's no real magical healing in this. There is magic, but really no magical healing. Most of the magic does horrible, horrible things.
Yeah.
Because it comes from a horrible, horrible place.
Correct.
If you have one of those major wounds, like you've taken over half your hit points, you have to make a con save while healing, and if you're successful, you get 1d3 hit points back per week instead of 1 a day.
Oof.
Yeah. You do get a bonus die on this if you're getting a professional medical care, like in a hospital or something like that.
Yeah. And there is no spamming of heal.
Yep. You can use first aid or medicine to try to repair wounds and stuff like that. But it's really difficult to do, and like first aid only repairs 1 hit point. And that is basically per instance of damage. You have to take damage again before you can before first aid can be used on you again. So you basically, like I said, you can't spam heal somebody. You can't just stand over them and be like, okay, well, I'm just going to use first aid 12 times and give them 12 hit points back. There are chase rules in the game.
Okay, that's always nice. I like chase rules.
It's a very good thing, especially for horror games, because you shouldn't
you should be running all the time.
You should be running from things all the time. The chase rules actually play out a lot like Savage Worlds rules. You've kind of got abstract distances. You kind of figure out an abstract movement base for everybody based on how fast there should be moved. There might be obstacles along the way that to be able to move along these abstract distances you need to resolve. And, of course, those should all be narratively appropriate. If you're being chased through a house, it might be a locked door. It might be a staircase you need to carefully navigate so not go tumbling down.
Right.
Something like that. And then, you might escape, or they might catch you. That might result into combat, or it might just result in the untimely death of your investigator. I don't know.
It happens.
Sanity.
I think sanity is the key of this entire game. It's a macabre stat that is necessary.
It's definitely the thing that sets it apart from other games.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that you actually can lose sanity, and you have temporary, indefinite, and permanent insanity that can occur. And it is such a important part of the system now.
Yeah.
that to say that, like, all the other stuff that we talked about are general mechanics necessary that, most game systems have if they're going to have any kind of tactical, or mechanical edge beyond, Dread's guess what, you're either alive or dead kind of moment.
Sure, sure.
This then adds that extra flavor edge that, like, White Wolf does with humanity, that, that some do with luck and other places like that, where you basically increase your ability to be cooler.
Yeah.
Sanity does just the opposite. It brings you closer to the edge.
Now, there's a lot of cool things about Sanity, though. So first off, I mean, it's very iconic because, like, it was the major theme of a lot of Lovecraft's writing. Was the, not that these events unfolded in real time as you were reading them, but more like, you took a look at the original story, Call of Cthulhu, that inspired this entire thing. It's basically a guy learning about Cthulhu's existence and going slowly mad as he learns more and more and more, and how deep that rabbit hole goes.
Yeah.
It's really not like... I mean, I think Cthulhu shows up, like, at the very end or something like that. Like, they see him, like, briefly.
I always assumed it was maybe they do.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's real iffy, and there's a very unreliable narrator. But basically, it's a story about him, like, realizing, like, oh, holy crap, we are screwed, and that's it. Like, that's the whole story. But it's about him going slowly insane as he makes that realization. So I mean, it's rooted right there in all of Lovecraft's writing. So you have a sanity score. It's I believe a derived stat. You cannot use luck to make sanity checks. You can't luck your way out of seeing horrible things or learning terrible secrets about the universe.
Which checks?
Sanity, you also can't get an extreme success on it.
Correct.
It's either pass or fail. And when you're confronted with something that should do damage to your sanity, you either pass and you take... Basically, all sanity loss has two values. You either take the minimum value, which is sometimes 0. Sometimes you can look things in the eye and go, all right, damn it, I see you're a monster, let's fight. And other times it drives you a little batty, and that's when you fail it, you take the other damage roll. If you can't critically succeed, but you can critically fail.
Oh.
And if you do that, you take the maximum of whatever randomized damage value that is. If you take even just a small amount of sanity damage, you're going to have some small reaction. That may be dropping whatever you're holding, gasping or screaming out loud, which may, in fact, reveal your position, et cetera, et cetera. Just a momentary, like, one-turn involuntary sort of thing. If you take 5 points, it requires an intelligence roll. If you pass, you go a little batty, because you understand the full implications of things. This is actually a roll you want to fail. The smarter you are, the easier it is for you to take sanity damage, because you understand what you're looking at.
Ooh, yeah, I could see that.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, okay.
Ignorance is bliss in this point. If you take half of your sanity in a single day, you're just indefinitely insane. Something happens. And now it may just be lingering paranoia. It may be hallucinations. I mean, it's not like, completely batty and you have to be checked into the institution. I mean, you maybe should be checked into the institution, but that's neither here nor there. You don't lose your character over it, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And then there's, like, little bouts of madness. Like, whenever you take these sort of things, you may be 1d10 rounds. If you have other people around to kind of, like, help you keep grounded and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But if you're alone, or if everyone else is also in a maddened state, that is 1d10 hours that these last. And these are, like, results in, like, short-term loss of your characters.
Yeah.
You may black out.
Yeah.
You may wake up in a ditch. Missing a shoe.
Yep.
Your wallet's gone. You have no idea how you got there.
Yeah,
you may wake up on a train.
Well, one of the ones that got me was there's a campaign that starts out where the players are a recovery team being sent to the moon, near the dark side of the moon, to pick up a existing group of scientists who were there that have gone incommunicado. Like, They went on a mission. They should have been back 6 hours ago. They didn't. So we're it's already too late. The green window closed. We now have to send a new team up there to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
And so you're the recovery team that's expendable. And literally the players launch, and then those characters get set to the side, and you play the main team to find out why they're incommunicado.
Oh, wow.
Knowing full and well that you will become incommunicado.
Yeah.
And the one thing that you read at the beginning of the game as the opening, and then you read again as you're launching as a reminder to the group is, the communication equipment is in perfect functioning order. Sends and retrievals on the automated Echo are working perfectly fine. So it's not equipment malfunction.
Yep.
There's something else going on.
Yep.
And it's a 2-part story, and I think it's fantastic that when you can do something like that, because it does have a shutdown moment, and maybe there are survivors.
Yeah.
So
You never know.
Yep.
Or maybe there are survivors and they are the new villains.
You don't know.
You don't know.
You don't know.
So you can recover sanity.
Yep.
I guess there's a little debate about whether this is an actual real rule or not. I was not able to find a solid answer on this one, but killing a mythos monster, I think it's a rule for pulp Cthulhu.
It would make sense.
Where if you kill a mythos monster, it emboldens you because you can you see that they're defeatable.
It's
essentially.
tangible and something. It's the
they do bleed.
Yeah, the 13th
Yes.
warrior. If it bleeds, it's a man. I can kill it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Raising a skill to 90. Because the self-discipline that it takes to master a skill in that way hardens your mind.
Okay.
Psychotherapy, professional help.
Yep.
Like, honest to goodness, go see a shrink. You've seen some horrible stuff. Check yourself into the asylum.
Yeah.
Or self-help. Visiting family, go to a place of peace, take a fishing vacation for a weekend.
Yeah.
Just get out of town where no cultists are trying to kill you.
Unless it's like something from the deep, and then maybe go wrangle cattle instead.
Yeah. After fighting deep ones, maybe hanging out on a lake isn't the greatest place.
Yeah.
You can also kind of get used to the awfulness. At a certain point, you kind of have to keep track of like your sources of sanity loss. Because after a certain point, you become inured to the damage. So like when you see a ghoul for the first time, they'll do like 1d3 sanity damage to you. Once they've done their maximum number, once they've done like 3 points, or like if they do d6, they do 6 points of sanity damage to you, they no longer affect you. So it's not like, running through a thing, you're going to see, oh, it's a ghoul, oh, it's a ghoul, oh, it's a ghoul, after a while you're like, it's another fucking ghoul,
Yeah.
And then, after some time, though, those numbers start going back down. So you're not, like, permanently immune to ghouls, but at least it does kind of cap things off, so you're not constantly being dinged for that.
Why am I thinking of the scene from The Mummy where the mummies all scream at him and then he screams back at them?
Yeah, something like that. Now, one cool thing is that if you do go temporarily mad, you may get some insane insight.
You see something from beyond.
You either see something from beyond, or your brain desperately firing on all cylinders, trying to connect what is actually happening to it, may connect two ideas in things clues you haven't even realized yet. So basically, the keeper may drop plot points on you, just like you realize in this moment of clarity that X, Y, and Z is really what's going on. You're like, holy crap. And then this one I really like, Mythos Hardened.
Oh, God, yeah.
So you have a skill called the Cthulhu Mythos skill. It starts at 0. And really the only way to bring it up is to study Mythos tomes. And, start looking at these arcane books of ancient lore of secrets men was not meant to know. So first off, whenever you gain Cthulhu Mythos score, it reduces your maximum sanity. So it starts at maximum 99. Now, you may only have 50, but your max is 99, right? Your cap comes down one for one with your Cthulhu Mythos score going up.
Okay.
So if you have a Cthulhu Mythos score of 25, your maximum sanity is 75.
Interesting.
If you have a 50,
It's
you have a
50.
maximum sanity of 50.
Okay.
Now, if your sanity ever dips below what your current Mythos score is, you permanently become Cthulhu Mythos hardened. Essentially, you know too much about this stuff that it just doesn't bug you anymore.
Yeah.
You've kind of got a grasp on it. It's become your reality.
Oh, wow.
And you take half sanity damage from then on.
Interesting.
Even if you recover sanity above your Mythos score again.
Interesting. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
You've just seen how deep the rabbit hole goes, and it doesn't bother you anymore. Like, you've kind of gotten used to it.
Okay. All right. I like this. I like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's magic.
Yeah.
We'll go over magic briefly. You do have a magic points spell attribute.
Mm-hmm.
But again, this isn't D&D. So
No.
you're not going to have like full blown wizards. You can pick up magics by like learning them from like I said, these Mythos tomes.
Yeah, the tomes.
Other casters.
Sure.
Or possibly even Mythos entities. Nothing saying you can't call something from beyond
Ooh,
and ask it to teach you something.
Yeah, this just goes right into warlocks.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it's a great idea, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody's going to be loving smiles at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It takes time, might cost you sanity. You have to perform the spell correctly at least once,
Mm-hmm.
Which of course can have disastrous results, whether it's successful or
Yeah.
not. And one of the cooler things is there's typically two versions of each spell. There's the regular version and the deeper magic version of it. So if you cast a spell while experiencing some sort of bout of insanity, it can give you insight into what the deeper version of that spell is if you make a successful Cthulhu Mythos check.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, it's permanently learned, even if your sanity gets recovered afterwards.
Yep.
So you can, if you're willing to walk the edge of sanity and stare into the abyss, and risk it staring back at you,
You might recover.
yeah, yep. And that's about all we have for the mechanics, honestly.
I mean, you did pretty good considering the bout of it all that, in a normal show we would have stopped.
yeah, exactly.
But
So
we press on. We press on.
all right. So what do you think this system does well here? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm gonna kind of step into the narrative a little bit here and say that I think one of the things that it's done probably the best at was keeping the story and I guess the mission statement of Call of Cthulhu the same through all of its editions, without a doubt. The base quote: "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown."
Mm-hmm.
This game, from day one to 7th edition, has exemplified that without question. It is a game based on fear, a basic dramatic game in that sense, and a carnal one at that. Without a doubt, we look at games being heroic or fantastical, but we also look at more today now, game systems also bending into romance games or support games, if you will. Masks is a good example of a support game where really it's less about you being a superhero and more about you supporting each other and working through the drama. This is purely the simplification of understanding fear and being able to role play it.
Yep.
And fear of something that is truly unknown, and coming to terms with that. And a lot of people that I've gone back and forth with try to make it a very heroic game, and it doesn't do a very good job of that because it is not.
Yeah. I think there's room for a little heroism of like a waitress, pulling, shakily pulling out the 38 special from her little clutch purse, and shooting one of the 3 cultists that are trying to murder her in the head before she escapes. But
Right.
like that can arguably be a heroic moment for her. But like
It's survival.
it's survival. Yeah.
Right. One of the things that was embedded in the book is eventual triumph of the players is not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's not that it's a possibility that you could fail. It is literally you might succeed at something.
Yeah, yeah.
So the idea of having multiple characters available to be able to continue a story is very much a thing.
I've heard people even say, like, if all of your characters live through even one game session, you're doing it wrong. And it's like, no, that's exhausting, and there wouldn't be character creation or character advancement rules if that were true.
Right.
But at the same time, though, there is a lot of the rules lean into the idea of a slow sort of attrition.
Yes.
The more contact you have with the mythos, the more the mythos kind of bleeds into you. And you can't remain the same.
Yeah.
You're going to slowly lose a little bit of sanity. Even if it's not, you're never truly insane, you're never going to be the same person you were when you started.
Right.
You're going to learn those secrets and you're never going to go back.
Right.
You know?
I mean, and that's the other thing about the game is because it is, in essence, at its very pulpy core, it's a mystery game. It is and Sandra Peterson used the term onion skin, where literally I peel a layer back and I don't get to the core. I get to another layer of the onion, and I get to another layer of the onion, and I just keep going down until eventually I've peeled so many layers that I now know this is an onion. Oh no!
Oh, and everybody's crying.
Yeah,
and everybody's crying,
and everyone's crying. And that's the thing is that it is a different way to tell a story, and different way to address that and push it out to players. Is that you're not trying to say, here is the conclusion that I expect you guys to get to. You are going to complete this dungeon and retrieve X item, and that is the end. And yay, let's do the little, Final Fantasy hands in the air, music playing kind of thing.
Everybody gets a level up and a medal at the end of the day. Yeah.
No. This is the hey, you're investigating a child abduction, and then you discover that there was family abuse. But the father was a little maddened about the daughter wearing red to school.
Yeah.
And then the daughter's missing, so now you've got to find the little girl, but then you discover that the mother might know where she is, but if she says anything, the father has ways of hearing her.
Right. And you're like, what the hell is that all about? And then you just peel back the onion skin
until eventually you find that the girl is missing because she's in hiding and she has something. She's got daddy's book because when he reads it, he gets angry at the world. And you're like, okay, so now you start finding more pieces. And again, each one of the layers doesn't lead you to a conclusion. It leads you to another mystery.
Yeah. A good keeper of secrets is never going to just stampede you with Dagon or Cthulhu or Azathoth on day one. It's going to start light, and then it's going to go deeper, and then it's going to go a little deeper, and then it's going to go a little until eventually you are just mired in the mythos, and you're like, how did I even end up here?
Yeah. One of the ways that I really liked this, and I'm going to tie this back to something completely weird, but the storytelling style, if you're looking for something that is not Cthulian, but you want to get the same feeling of how did I get from here to there, is Gravity Falls. The kids show Gravity Falls. Starts with two kids who go to hang out with their weird uncle at a mystery spot in the woods. And it ends in a way that you could never imagine.
Fair enough.
Because it's layer after layer after layer, and every time you think you're ready for the next layer, there's something more.
Okay.
And this exemplifies that kind of storytelling, and I think it's fantastic. And I think it's something that can be taken from this system whole cloth and used properly. And
absolutely.
So what it does well is it teaches us, and this is where I'm going to get to this, is that it teaches us a amazing way to do storytelling that is different at the core from what we're used to day to day.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the best things that they did to help with this is immersion. The system actually, I don't remember which one it was, but I want to say it was the Horror on the Orient Express. When you bought that, you actually got physical items, matchbooks, business cards.
Oh, yeah.
That were defaced and marred, that you could literally give to your players with their portraits so that they had a representation of the game in their hand. We've talked about that so many times, and I always think that is a great way to pull your characters even further into the story.
I thought it would be really cool if we did run this, even if it's a one-shot, just to ask everybody to dress up as their characters.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Just to have that for the day, you know? The thing that I think that I like, I mean, definitely everything you just said. But like mechanically, the thing that I really like is it reminded me a lot of Savage Worlds in that it kind of and I suppose Dungeons and Dragons is very good at this too. At least the 5th edition, where you take one mechanic for resolving your everything, and that's it. That's the mechanic you need to know. In D&D, it's roll a d20, add your modifiers. Is it over the target number? Cool.
Yeah.
In Savage Worlds, it's roll the dice that it says, plus your wild die. Is it over a 4? Yes. Cool. In this, it's 2d10. It's just a percentile die.
And it's under.
And is it under?
Yeah.
And is it under a certain threshold?
Yep.
And that's it.
Very, very simple. The one other thing that I wanted to add story narrative-wise that I think they did really good was it, unlike D&D, it pulls you from railroading. But only by giving you those triggers. And we talked about the story beats and creating a timer, a doom clock, if you will.
Yeah.
Those layers take the doom out of it because there's not an end point. It's just a layer handed off. And those kinds of stories, again, are prevalent. That kind of storytelling style and presentation happens everywhere through all of the seven editions and their adventure books, is that it teaches you how to tell the story, less the content.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that we've always talked about being challenging in any of the systems, is it really doesn't teach you how to tell the story. It gives you the mechanics. It gives you the components. It tells you about the world. It gives you a feel. But how do I tell that story? And this paints it in black and white. Hey, this is where we start. This is what they're uncovering. This is how they uncover the next layer.
Yep.
This is what you present to them next. Here's your next page to present to them. It's not giving you the end. Like, kind of in the back of their heads, they know the end is something large, but they're only being doled out one page at a time.
Yep.
And it keeps the story flowing. And I love that it takes this kind of a system, this dramatic dip into chaos, to present this mystery style, and it's beautiful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are the foibles of the system? I mean, obviously, if you don't like horror, this game is not for you, like, flat up. This is why I kind of was joking about this as one of the greatest game systems I will never play.
Yeah. Agreed.
Because I really want to play it.
Yep.
But damn if I can find anyone else in my current group that does.
Yeah.
And I might be able to get Matthew, but
I think you could probably get 3 or 4 of the players to play it. I think the hardest part you're going to have is that to run the system properly, we run the risk of changing our storytelling styles. And I
think you should. I think you should have to.
You have to, and but at the same time, that's hard. We know that's hard.
Sure.
So, I mean, it'd be a challenge. It definitely would
start
be
off with one of the established modules or something like that.
True.
Like you said, there's plenty of those.
Plenty.
This is definitely a highly lethal game.
Yes.
Either because your character dies or because your character goes insane. So if you are one of those players that needs to feel attached to your character, and if anything bad happens to them, that it's going to affect you. If you get what they call bleed a lot, if you bleed into your character a lot, this may not be a good game for you, because things are going to happen to your investigator all the time.
Yeah. Somebody once said that this is great for conventions because you can walk away.
Yeah.
Walking away from the table is important, and sometimes being in bed with your friends on horror is bad.
Yeah.
Likewise, and under that same thing, is that the power curve is dead flat.
Dead flat.
I mean, yes, you can get better at your skills, but realistically, it ain't going to go that far.
There's no level ups. There's no cool new abilities around that next experience point. There's not even, like, edges to buy with your advances like there is in Savage Worlds. Like Savage Worlds has a pretty flat power curve, but even that is like extreme compared to this. You will start a lowly investigator and you will end a lowly investigator.
Yeah, I think you put an interesting point in here, and I was really looking at this one like, oh yeah, I guess that's true, is that it can be played like a slasher flick, but that is not its best quality.
Mm-hmm.
It's that you don't know. I mean, if you see the slasher, if you see Jason or Freddy Krueger, you know who they are. Like,
yes,
they're a tangible thing.
And that's like American horror is usually that style of thing. So it's what we're exposed to all the time. When I say we're going to play a horror game, you think, okay, we're going to be being chased by a big monster, and we're all supposed to be afraid of it and scream. Like, that doesn't sound fun. But no, that's not really where Call of Cthulhu gets its horror from. Call of Cthulhu gets it from, okay, you, well, honestly, I pulled a little Lovecraftian horror on you guys in my D&D game.
You definitely did.
Which was, okay, so this woman is, like, insane, and she's hiding in the mine. And you're like, okay, well, let's go get the crazy lady out of the mine. Mm-hmm. It's weird that she's this crazy, and she's doing some weird stuff. But basically, we knocked her out, we took her back to her husband, said put her to bed, put an ice pack on her head. We had to hit her. Sorry. Mm-hmm. That night, he comes back in saying that she's changed. And you're like, what do you mean she's changed? And you go walking up to the mine, and the tracks are warped and distorted. And you're like,
iron rails.
Like something melted them and then solidified them again.
Right.
And you're like, what the hell? Something used the smudge tool from Photoshop on these things, you know?
Yeah.
And you get in there, and she has turned into a gibbering mouther. Just this giant mass of just gelatinous eyes and teeth and screaming voices and stuff like that. And you guys were just like, what the hell is that? That is Lovecraftian horror.
And we killed it with fire.
And you killed it with fire. We
killed it with fire.
Now imagine if you didn't have that option.
Yeah.
If then it turned into a chase scene.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And that's exactly what we're talking about this, is that it is determined to make you stressful in it. And I think, honestly, I have enough stress in my life.
Yeah. But it can be cathartic.
It can be cathartic.
Because all of these are stresses you can walk away from at the end of the day.
I am certain that there are listeners out there somewhere on this going, why am I not playing this?
Yeah.
And to you, I say, play on.
Exactly.
Everyone has a game. Play on.
You can do a lot worse than Call of Cthulhu by
Chaosium. You could. And by all means, there are some beautiful storytelling techniques all throughout this. I love it all. There are aspects of it I will be incorporating from some of the stuff that I read just in the research of this that I think is super fantastic.
And I'm going to give another shout out to Seth Skorkowski, because it was a large part of my research came from him as well. Yeah. He does a lot of reviews, not a 7-part series just about 7th edition, but also reviews of basically every other module. And some of the source books that have come out and stuff like that too.
He's fantastic at it. So if you are interested, again, go dig into Seth. If you need a link, come to our Discord. We will send it to you. But otherwise, look him up. He's got great videos.
Yep. So we have a couple questions.
I think they're really good.
We're already running pretty late, but we can get through these here.
Whatever.
So
it's our show. They don't have mics.
That's true. So Knox in the Box asks, my Call of Cthulhu question has to do with classes and roles. With defined archetypes and roles, in a pinch situation, players can spring into positions a bit more readily. However, since it isn't really a class-based system and characters die a lot, what are some tips for helping uncustomized players adjust and find their roles and purposes in the group a bit more seamlessly?
So I go back to being a GM and having to have a deck of NPCs ready to go. And I think that is a great kind of way to look at it, is that the whole stat block is not your character. Your character has a career, they have a job, they have a motivation, they have a drive. Those are great start points. Mm-hmm. So if you can literally just figure out somebody who, start from one of the positions, maybe a name intrigues you. What does that name infer for a job? What is the first thing you think that they're doing? And that's the beauty of Call of Cthulhu, is anyone can be. So, if you're like, I don't know what to play. Okay, come up with a name. All right, Bob Philback. Okay, what does Bob Philback do? Mm-hmm. He's an insurance salesman, because that's what sounds like an insurance salesman. Great. What's his motivation? bowling on Friday night. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That he loves to bowl on Friday night. So he's a very personal brain. This very quickly then adapts into creating a very quick character and having that kind of drive be what brings him into the story is something mysterious. That's your storyteller who's going to bring that and pull that together for
Right.
you.
I think the question though is like what when you don't have defined roles like fighter and
Right.
rogue and cleric.
Yep.
Like cleric is going to be the healer, the fighter is going to be the person up in their faces and stuff like that. When you've got vague or undefined roles like this, how do you have a group structure?
Well, that's the thing, is that you have to go back to their motivations and their drive.
Mm-hmm.
Why? What puts them in a place that they want to be? He's a bowler, so he's a team person.
Mm-hmm.
Is he the captain on the team? Is he the pinch guy? So that helps you fit into how you play with the other people at the table.
Okay, fair enough. Fair
So
enough.
I always find drive and motivation are the two hardest things to get to, but they come from the other elements of the NPC that I create.
Right.
And then quirks sit on top of that. So
I'd say my answer is pretty similar in that you're gonna it's more thinking about the character as a well-rounded individual with
right.
with motivations and sure you're gonna have skills and stuff like that, but it's just looking at what those skills are, what your profession brings to the table and such like that kind of defines where your role is. But at the same time though, the other thing I kind of want to bring to the discussion is like one thing that like we had as feedback from the first session of Savage Worlds that we played was that we moved from Dungeons and Dragons where people did have clearly defined roles. And there was a mentality that like, oh, someone needs to be talked to. So that means that's the bard's job.
The face does that, you
right.
know?
The bard does that. Oh, this is a church thing? The cleric does that. Oh, we're going to talk to the criminal underground. The rogue does that.
Right.
But then when we didn't have those set roles,
right.
when suddenly I stripped the classes away from you, the cleric went to go talk to the criminal underground.
Sure.
Yeah. And it becomes... It's almost freeing, in a sense, not to have the clearly defined roles, because then there's nothing saying that you can or can't do these things. If you're good at talking to people because you're a waitress and you deal with people all day, and you have a high persuasion score because of that, sure. The waitress is now the face of the group, if you need a face. But that's also not saying that multiple, like the private investigator can absolutely be,
right.
a face as well. You can send the two of them out together to talk to somebody. Who cares,
Or you have like a stay-at-home mom who's like, I'll talk to the kid.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't even think about that.
And, there's also more than one way to interface with people, too. So, in Call of Cthulhu, there's charm, persuasion, intimidate, a few things like that, where you've got different approaches you can take. Sometimes a person may be, not willing to negotiate with you, but someone with a high charm skill might be able to call him sweetie and catch that twinkle in his eye, and he might just cave,
True.
So I think that it's a good thing that roles aren't clearly defined.
No, I agree. I think it's more important, actually, especially in a mystery situation. And I think if you're tending to do those types of games where you're having more of a mystery, or the setting is not tactical by nature, removing the roles help.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yep.
So.
And as far as how to get that into a group that like is having trouble finding their roles, I would say just be a fan of your players. If someone's like, maybe we should go talk to them. Yeah, absolutely. You can go talk to them.
Yep.
Cool. How do you want to do this? What's your approach?
Yeah. Always approach.
Et cetera, et cetera. So
Overwatch has an interesting question. This will be fun to go through. The great old ones, Elder Gods, Outer Gods, Yog-Sothoth, Cthulhu, Nyarlathotep, Dagon, Shrub-Nugath, Hastur, once, times 3. Which is your most story campaign-friendly cosmic horror, and what is it about them that works? I mean, I got my own, but I want to hear yours.
I'm really going to be dead honest with you. I don't know.
You don't know because you don't know them all?
Well, I don't know that I'm familiar enough with all of them and their various idiosyncrasies and various mythos and stuff like that.
Sure.
To really know. Like, I read the story Azathoth.
Okay.
And it was really just a guy ranting at the stars.
All right, that's fair.
And then I read the story Dagon, and it's basically a guy ranting at the sea.
I mean, fair. Okay.
And then I read the story Call of Cthulhu. And it was a guy going, holy crap, there's this thing in the ocean.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
And people worship him. oh, that's messed up.
Yeah.
So, like, going to the source material wasn't actually terribly helpful to me. Now, I learned far more from playing the Eldritch Horror tabletop game, where they have game mechanics attached to them.
Sure.
So I would say, was it Shub-Nugaroth, the goat with 1,000 young?
I believe that's correct, yes.
That one I found rather compelling, because that's monster spam.
Mm-hmm.
I found the Yellow King is one of the non-Lovecraftian ones.
Yeah, okay.
Have you seen the Yellow Sign?
Okay.
Is the phrase
yes.
you may know from
Yes,
that.
yes.
The Yellow King is very compelling because it's all about a play called The King in Yellow, but like when you read it, you become obsessed with it and drawn into that sort of thing. He's this horrible, horrible thing. I think those are probably the two. Like if I were to run a Call of Cthulhu game right now, it would probably either be Shub or the King in Yellow.
Okay. The first one that came to mind was even before I put my notes down was Narlahotep. And that's only strictly because there was a terrible joke about Narlahotep calling in the old ones in like a Babylon 5-esque world.
Okay.
And I can't remember the name of the guys with the huge hazmat suits in Babylon 5. It blows my mind. Are basically come and stop him from doing it.
Oh,
and it's just he's just being ridiculously funny in the whole thing. But in fact, I did study Yog-Sothoth for something, and that was because in Dunwich Horrors, there's a particular quote that basically describes him, where he is a gatekeeper, but less of a gatekeeper of a physical gate. And yet it's there. So a phantasmal wall, if you will, that separates the sleeping old ones from current space. And he knows when it was put up. He knows why it was put up, how many holes are in it, who's passed through it before, now, and soon.
Mm-hmm.
And because he knows everything, he's seen it all.
Mm-hmm.
He's seen everything at all times. He's not like a million eyes. He's just there. He's like the watcher.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of a thing. And that alone makes him, like, he's older than the old ones because he was there when it was made. Which makes him kind of even more terrifying in that sense.
Yeah, a little bit.
So having him at the core of any game, where he is the gray villain, if you will.
The lurker at the threshold.
Yeah.
He is the gate. He is the key.
Correct. He's every part of it. And in that, he doesn't unlock the door, but he knows who does. And he knows how it's unlocked. He knows when it's going to be unlocked. And the question is, are you doing his bidding? Is he directing you to that time?
And there's also that sort of like lingering horror of like he's essentially the Hoover Dam between you and the other old ones.
Sort of.
In that, like, he's the threshold. So,
I'd like to say that he is the glass between you and
the
them.
lion on the other side.
Correct.
Yes.
And he knows when he's going to break.
Uh-huh.
And he knows exactly how he's going to break. And the question is, he's talking to you about that moment.
That's Lovecraft, everybody.
And that's why I think he's a fantastic old one in that sense, that he can be all of those things.
Yeah.
Both friendly and foe, all at the same time, and still be this omnipotent thing that you can't quite wrap your head around.
One of the best things I read was putting Lovecraftian horror in perspective, and it was basically about a guy who has some ants in his house, and they learn to speak, and they learn to say his name, and they realize that he walks past them one time, and they're like Jeff, and he's like, what did the ants just talk to me? And they're like, we worship you. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. What's up, ants? And then they like start asking him for favors and stuff like that, and he's like, sure, whatever. You want me to kill this other ant colony? Okay, whatever. I've got a can of Raid. Done.
Yeah.
And it's like that offhanded to him, and it's so weird that these little insects have learned to call his name, and he just like, yeah, sure. Between lunch break and dinner, I'll do this weird
You'll be
thing
a
for you
god.
because whatever, life and death to you is meaningless to me, and that's basically Lovecraftian horror.
No, that's a perfect analogy. I'd say it.
Or the other way I've heard it phrased is, if you is like an ant realizing what a circuit board is,
Ooh.
and then coming back with that knowledge of like that
I've
ant
seen it.
existent isn't this. There are something so much bigger.
Yeah. All right. Well, next week's topic, we're going to go into playing alignments correctly.
Quote giant air quotes correctly.
You can find us on Twitter at @ST_Conclave, on Instagram at @ST_Conclave, on Mixlr every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. at mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave. You can also find a link to our Discord on our Twitter or on our page at storytellerconclave.com.
And a big thank you to all of our Patreon members, Knox in the Box, Sam, Arcane Asylum, Sparkle Motion, Vedran, and Hulavu. Thank you so much for contributing to us month after month and helping us keep the show going. Our pre-show music is by Arcane Anthems. You can find that at patreon.com/arcaneanthems. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Geefrog. You can find that up at geefrog.bandcamp.com or up on Google Music. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Mid-Air Machine. You can find that up at freemusicarchive.org.
We'd like to say again, thank you to our families, to Vicky and Sean for supporting us through all of this that we've been doing. All of our friends who have made our games wonderful and given us these stories to be able to share with you, and you, our listeners.
Yeah, Cthulhu Fatagan. We love you.
We love
Good
you.
night.
Good night.